we probably revert back to the old programming, which was I'm not enough, I'm not deserving of this. And wherever that comes from, whether it's from childhood, whether it's from past experiences, whether it's from relationships or past relationships, it doesn't matter. But when we get put in a uncomfortable or new situations, so once again, getting positive feedback was something that was new to me, obviously with my past coming from a life of addiction and coming from jail. Alrighty, legends. Thank you for joining me again for a solo episode of the Interchange podcast. It feels like it's been a long time since I did one of these, and that's probably because I batch record most of these when I do them. And it's probably been about 4 or 5 weeks since I've actually released one of these episodes. But before we get to today's content, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, this beautiful black eye of mine. But I thought I'd make it a little bit fun for you all. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this very first part of the podcast into a reel, post it on Instagram, and I'm going to put it out to the audience to come up with the most elaborate story that you possibly can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 5 of these stories. I'm going to put them into a poll on Instagram, and the winner is going to receive a happier, healthier you journal. So I'll send one of those out to you guys. But I want you to come up with the most elaborate story for how you think that this black eye may have taken place. So that's the rules of the game. If you want to win a happier, healthier you journal, come up with the best story you possibly can for how I ended up with this beautiful eyeshadow that's going to be permanent for the next few days. But today I wanted to talk about something that I noticed about myself, which I kept doing, and I didn't really have any idea where that came from. And that was when people would give me compliments or give me positive feedback, I'd always deflect and put it back onto them. When someone would tell me that they were grateful for me or something like that, I would put it back on them and tell them how grateful I was for them. And low key, this is actually a form of, I guess, not accepting a compliment or not accepting the feedback. And it comes back to a lack of self-worth. So this is something that I actually had to work through. And it's still something that I'm working through because I catch myself doing it from time to time still to this day. So yeah, I don't know. Have you guys ever experienced this where someone gives you a compliment or someone says something nice about you and you sort of shut it down by saying something back about them, rather than being present in the moment and just accepting the compliment or accepting that positive feedback? So like I said, this comes back to a lack of self-worth generally. It's because we don't know how to take the positive feedback, and maybe it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, which was what I was experiencing. Whether it be a message, whether it be a phone call from a friend, whether it be a conversation I'm having with someone that I've never met or someone that I do know, what would happen is that I'd get this positive feedback or this affirmation, whatever it might have been, and then all of a sudden I'd be deflecting it and talking about them rather than talking about myself. And I think a big part of this comes back to feeling like I didn't deserve to be spoken about in that way, or didn't deserve to take up space for that time in that very time. And after doing a little bit of work, I started to realize that once again, this comes back to my own lack of self-worth. And as I said, this is something that I'm working through, and I can definitely take a lot more positive feedback these days as opposed to what I used to be able to do. But when I first, I guess, realized this, it was something that made me feel really uncomfortable. And I was like, how can I be here coaching people and helping people when I can't even take the positive feedback myself? And it sort of sparked this idea in my head that, you know, there must be so many other people out there that struggle with this as well. But then there's also the polar opposite of that, the flip side of the coin, where there's people that can't wait to get things said about them or can't wait to have positive things said about them, almost like they're, fishing for them. And I actually recognize that this is something that I used to do as well. So it's gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. So I used to try and call it being humble, but I know for a fact that I'm not the most humble person. And it really comes back to feeling uncomfortable and feeling like um, when someone would say something positive about me, like I wasn't deserving of that. So how do we work on this and how do we move past this? Well, the thing to do that I really found helped me was really getting clear on the expectations I have of myself and the things that I really do feel about myself. So even though there was a lack of self-worth there, I knew that I was a good person. I knew that I was a good dad. I knew that I was a great coach. I knew that, and I still know that I am going to do amazing things in the world and that I have all these things happening for me because of the work that I've put in. So in turn, I am deserving of these compliments. But once again, if we have that story that we tell ourselves that I'm not enough or I'm not deserving of something, then when someone does give us this positive feedback, we probably revert back to the old programming, which was I'm not enough, I'm not deserving this. And wherever that comes from, whether it's from childhood, whether it's from past experiences, whether it's from relationships or past relationships, it doesn't matter. But when we get put in a uncomfortable or new situations, so once again, getting positive feedback was something that was new to me. Obviously, with my past coming from a life of addiction and coming from jail, this positive feedback and being able to have this impact in the world was something that was unfamiliar to me. It's almost like it made me feel a bit of that imposter syndrome, like I don't deserve this, and this is all right for someone else, but not for me. And when this would surface, it would bring me back to that old way of thinking, which was once again, I'm not enough, I'm not deserving of this, I am always just going to be a drug addict. So the only way to be able to positively accept feedback is to actually believe those things about yourself. So where does that start? Well, it starts with having that conversation with yourself around, I guess, what you feel like your worth is. And even though you might not feel like you are deserving of all the things in your life at this very point in time, uh, think about the things that you feel like you do deserve. Think about the things in your life that you have worked hard for, right? There's no one else that's given those things to you. Those are the things that you have earned. You haven't deserved them, you've earned them. So that's a good place to start. And then from there, it's about actually getting clear on, I guess, your values, your beliefs, and who you think that you are. And what will happen is you'll start to notice that when these people are giving you positive feedback, that's actually in alignment with who you think you are. But once again, we have to get really clear on this and actually have to start to believe it for ourselves, because it's all well and good for other people to be giving us this positive feedback. But that's going to probably even make us shut down even further if that's something that we're struggling with. So for me, when I started to really become aware of this and really become aware of the fact that I was always deflecting it, and that's like a classic example of, not being able to accept positive feedback or being able to accept affirmations, is when you deflect it and put it back on the person. When someone says, "Hey, I'm really, really proud of you for doing this," and you go, "Well, you know what, mate? I'm really grateful for you being in my life." That's like a classic deflection. And even though it doesn't sound like a negative thing, that's you feeding back into the fact that you can't take on that positive feedback or you can't take on that positivity about yourself, because deep down, you don't believe it about yourself. So now that we're clear on that, and now we're clear on where it comes from, we need to get clear on how we can start to move forward from it. So if you think about the things that you do believe about yourself, well, this is subconscious programming because of the experiences and the things that you've lived through. So how do we change the subconscious programming? Well, that's by taking conscious action consistently. So I've spoken about this before in this podcast, but 5% of who we are today is conscious action. The other 95% is subconscious programming. So that means that if we want to make changes to how we feel about ourselves and the image that we have around ourselves in our head, we need to change the subconscious programming. And even though it's hard to do, once again, these stories that you have about yourself, they aren't necessarily the truth, and they weren't always your truth. So if they weren't always your truth, that means they took time to become ingrained in who you are. And in turn, if you want to change that, it will take time, but yes, you can change the stories that you tell to yourself. So come up with a new story. What would the new story be? So this is I guess, a great place for us to start looking at affirmations. And I know that people say, "Oh, affirmations, they're woo-woo bullshit," just like meditation, all that sort of stuff. But there actually is some merit to it, because the power of words, right? And people say they're just words, but if they're just words, then how is it that someone can say something and it trigger you and make you feel so small? And that's just from one sentence. So there must be some merit to the fact that words are powerful, right? So start to look at the language you use for yourself. And this is the thing, we're all having these conversations with ourselves, whether it be conscious or subconsciously. The subconscious conversations, though, are generally the conversations around "I'm not enough" and that old programming that we used to have. So if we can change that and bring it to a conscious level and start to rewrite the stories we're telling about ourselves, for instance, instead of being "I'm not enough," it could be "I am more than enough." Writing this down on a piece of paper and saying it to yourself out loud every day. Well, even though you might not believe this right now at this very point in time, I'm sure there was a point in time where you never thought that you would believe that you weren't good enough as well. I mean, we probably don't have conscious thought around that at the time when we know that we are actually good enough, which is obviously when we're a child. But as these stories that we do tell ourselves now took time to create, if we put the time and effort in and tell ourselves a new story, eventually that will become the new norm. And it will feel very uncomfortable at first because it is something that's new to us. But that's the same as going to school on the first day. I've used this example plenty of times, but you go to school on the first day, you're nervous, you're scared, you're really, really, really uncomfortable. And then you realize that the other kids aren't going to eat you and the teachers aren't there to hurt you. And all of a sudden, it becomes a comfortable situation. Just as saying these positive things about ourselves will become comfortable as well. So I want you to think about this. If you are someone that sort of deflects or struggles to take on positive feedback or struggles to take on affirmations or struggles to take on people giving you compliments. This is another example of that, right? So if people are giving you compliments and you struggle to take compliments, that comes back to a lack of self-worth as well because you can't see it within yourself. So start with something small. Start with something positive that you can see about yourself and remind yourself of that every day and then start to build on that. And once you can build on that, you'll start to change that negative feedback that you are giving yourself. Because if you're focusing on all the negative things you have in your life, you will give yourself more evidence for why you have those negative things in your life. But if you can start to focus on the positives and the things that you do love about yourself and the things that are going good for you, then in turn you will change your focus and in turn you'll be able to take on that positive feedback as well. So just to recap, this has all been about taking on compliments, taking on affirmations, and taking on positive feedback, and how me in my previous days used to deflect this positivity because I couldn't see it within myself. And then by doing the work on myself and changing the story that I was telling myself about myself, I was able to then start to take on that positive feedback and in turn vibrate at a higher frequency and in turn live a better and happier life. So start with something small. Start with affirmations, for instance, and say to yourself every day in the mirror that every day in the mirror that you are enough and that you are deserving of love and that you are going to be wealthy. And say them as this. So I am wealthy. Say them as if they are already taking place in your life. I am successful. I am loved. I am a great father. I am a great mother. I am abundant with everything in my life. Rather than, those negative self-talk, that negative self-talk that we do have, which is once again the subconscious programming. And the more and more you do that, the more and more it will layer on top of that subconscious programming and become the new norm for you. So I hope that's given you guys some value around how you can start to shift your mindset and start to take on that positivity in your life. Because if that's something you're struggling with, trust me, you're not alone. That was something I struggled with too. And don't forget, guys, if you have watched this episode and you have enjoyed it, even if you've gotten a little bit of value out of it in some way, shape or form, please share this with a friend. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because there's now this is episode number 50. So there's 50 episodes, 51 when this will be released as well. So please, please, please share it with a friend and help me to keep growing this platform. See you on the next episode.